Okay, now, Pete, one of the questions I had for you is that you had mentioned before that you didn't like the term consciousness field, and you would prefer the term information field. And I was wondering if you could explain why that distinction was made in your discussion.
Because to me, the consciousness field deals with consciousness, and the information field is mostly unconscious.
I'd like to double-click on that and get more information on that link.
Well, the information field holds everything in the known universe. And there's consciousness. Each person has their own consciousness and their own consciousness field. It's like it's one of the characteristics of individuality, or I'll say information field. It's one of the characteristics of the information field that I think the best English word for it is soul or spirit. And the individual consciousness field of each person is very, very different. And the information field holds everyone's consciousness, while the consciousness field holds each individual's consciousness, or their, I guess we could say, spiritual characteristic, though I use spiritual in a very different method than it's used by religions.
My witness Daniel referred to spirit as the intellect. He said that the intellectual aspects of mind are non-local, that they're not happening in the nervous system at all. They're in the field where those cognitive processes take place.
I absolutely agree with that. They're definitely non-localized. They're in the consciousness field, which is not localized with the person whatsoever. It's everywhere and every when. It's not a device. It's not a part of the neural or even non-neural anatomy. It's a field. It's like a magnetic field or an electric field in some respects, in the respects of a field, but it's non-local, even though it appears to be somewhat centered around the actual individual. It may be what some people call the aura, but it also has tentacles, if you would, that extend through time and space to infinity.
There's a Russian scientist named Budakovsky who takes a holographic photograph of a healthy raspberry plant, shines that light into a raspberry tumor, and the tumor cells rearrange into healthy raspberry cells, and it grows a new plant. Are you familiar with anything like that?
Well, I am. I wasn't aware of that experiment, and would very much like to be, because I'm looking for things that I can instrument and observe to try to come to some conclusions. But that, to me, would be a necessity that things be that way.
Right.
And for example, one thing I found in human medicine, I'd like to be familiar with the experiment, but for example, I found out in human medicine, for example, I've come to the conclusion, and feel I can prove that to any competent neuroanatomist, that the DNA is merely a factory that generates the physical part of the body. The DNA gets its information from the informational field, and how to do that. So you find that the informational field is eternal and holds the spirit or the being or the information of the person in perfection, whereas the perfection then runs through the factory. If the factory is missing the thing that puts the wheels on, the wheels are going to fall off, if you would. And so the DNA problems that you get with human health and anatomy are errors that are in the DNA, which it appears are pretty much passed down through the family tree, and but there's also information that comes down through the family tree, and that's shown by a lot of work that was done by Joseph Chilton Pearce, for example, reported by him in The Magical Child. And there's information that's transmitted to heart tissue, actually brain tissue that's in the heart, and that holds most of the person's information about emotional things and a lot of information about taste. For example, they found people with heart transplants all of a sudden love mustard when they couldn't stand it beforehand. And they find that the person that was the donor loved mustard. They find that the person that was the donor was a very loving person, where the person who lost the heart lost it because of a lot of frustration and a lot of stress, and they were a person that wasn't a loving person. Now they become a very loving person, and the people around them have no idea how to relate to them.
Does each person have the same degree of contact with this information field or consciousness field?
I would doubt that they do, because they're all individual. For example, there are people who just seem to be informationally troubled, if you would, which has nothing to do with being, personally troubled, but they seem to have problems even when you go in and correct things in their. This is from a health field, because I spent many years in that field building medical instruments, and they were all computerized, and we had, years and years and thousands of patient visits that we could go back and take a look at and correlate the long-term data. Those the instruments have been out there now for 28 years in the marketplace, and some 16,000 plus instruments around the world, and well over 1.5 million patient visits. So we have correlated that data and have shown that much of this must be the way that things are. So like the statement that you made was one that I absolutely agree with, that that out of necessity there has to be an informational field, and out of necessity there has to be something that drives the DNA. And then we find now we've done some experiments showing that we can generate this field around the body, and the body will act as if the DNA were perfect. If they had a genetic disease, the genetic disease goes away. Now with the advent of stem cell research, we find out that we can use a person's own stem cells in the body and heighten this field around the body, and the cells they had that are replicable cells that had a genetic problem, the genetic problem goes away because the informational field holds the perfect information rather than the flawed information of the gene itself.
Well, that's like the Budakovsky raspberry thing I told you.
Exactly.
Tumor is transformed, yeah.
Yep.
How could someone strengthen their contact with this field that they have? Do you have any exercises or ways, technology perhaps, anything that they could do?
I have technology that could do that, and that's one of the products that I intend to come out with once we get the laboratory and factory completely built.
Well, that's tantalizing. What what have you done?
Well,
what could you do? What could it do for someone?
We'll know that once we get it done and do the testing on it. So I know what I think it would do, and we've been very successful with these instruments. The American Medical Association publishes every year the number of clinical diagnoses that they feel that their doctors got correct. And this year it jumped all the way up to 6% from 5% the previous year. We have 85% of the patients that are that use the medical equipment that I'm talking about. 85% of the patients feel that within 2 days they don't have what they had when they came.
Do you believe in acupuncture points on the body? Well,
I have to believe in them because they're there, and you can go to Radio Shack or you can go to Harbor Freight and buy a $4 or $5 meter and adjust the meter appropriately and run those on the body and find every one of the points, put a little dot there, go compare yourself to an acupuncture chart, and you'll look exactly the same. And I did find out how the acupuncture system works. There have been a number of people that postulated it, but they didn't show that it worked. And I worked with Dr. Jean-Claude Duras at the French Institute of Science. He's a very famous acupuncturist. He taught the Chinese acupuncture. They did away with acupuncture in the 20s and made it illegal, even though it was practiced down every alley. And then during the Cultural Revolution, they brought it back. And the reason for that was they had a huge plague, and acupuncture wouldn't cure the plague, but penicillin would. So the French missionaries brought in penicillin, and so they did away with acupuncture and went with penicillin. But acupuncture has its definite uses, as does the sister of acupuncture, which is Chinese herbal medicine. And it makes sense. If you put certain chemicals in the body and certain precursors, you're going to get certain chemical reactions out of the body. So anyway, the acupuncture system is very interesting. What we did is we injected radioactive potassium into each acupuncture point while the person was under a high-speed CAT scan machine, and we found that the radioactivity moved directly to the organ associated with that point for the 3,300 years that the Neijing has been around talking about it, and for the 6,200 years that Ayurvedic medicine has been talking about it. So we found there was a direct correlation to the, not only to the organ system, but to actual parts of it. For example, down the outside of the thumb, you have a point that gives you information about the entire lymphatic system, just below the first joint, but above the first joint it talks about the lymphatics that are in the tonsillary ring. And when we inject here, the radioactive material goes to the tonsillary ring. We inject here, it goes to the whole lymphatic system. And you go down and it you know, goes on down the body. And the same thing, you know, as you work across the hand, you have lymph and lung and circulation and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Come over here and you have the heart and the small intestine. And you can go down and inject here, and it goes to the mitral valve. Here it goes to the aorta. Here it goes to the, you know, this chamber, that chamber, et cetera, et cetera. Then you go down on the feet. The acupuncture points to the same thing. We also found that the acupuncture points, the acupuncture meridians aren't veins, they aren't vessels. The acupuncture meridians, as they're called, aren't really meridians. They're made up of that, if you've ever cleaned a game animal or a chicken, you'll notice that between the organs, or done surgery, between the organs is a white filmy layer. That layer is built up like a baklava. It's built up in a number of layers, and each of those layers is a capacitive, conductive surface, not meant for conducting materials such as radioactive potassium, but it works as does anything in the body. The body's a biological mechanism. It works like the intestine does peristaltically, like the heart does peristaltically, and it's ionic in nature, so it's polarized, and so it pulsates and moves information. So that system was an information system, and the points are just above and below each joint, and you have them down each side of the hand. They're around at an area that's about 45-degree angle toward the finger, and you can take something like a ballpoint pen. I don't see one here, but you can take just the not the point of the pen, but the point of the case, and you can probe about 45-degree angle just above and below each joint. And most people don't know there's a joint just like this joint and this joint and this joint right down here at the wrist, and you can probe those places, and on ones where you're having a problem with the organ or organ system, you'll find a little hard nodule under the skin just above and below the joint, about a 40, and if you rub back and forth past those ones that aren't too bad, once you don't have a bad problem, you'll feel a little nodule, but it will actually palpate like it were a little grain of rice filled with a coarse sand. You'll feel a grittiness or a graininess. And you go up below the joint and above the joint, and so you can tell where you have a problem. Now, what acupuncturists don't want you to know is if you take something that's a little milder rounded and rub that point, it'll feel really good if you have a problem there. And if you take a piece of metal and do the same thing, different points will feel differently, because the metal things tends to discharge in excess of electric field there, and the plastic would tend to charge up a point of extra field there.
Hmm.
And it turns out there's a type of material called an electret. An electret is to electric field like a magnet is to magnetic field. So there's a way of putting a permanent electric charge on a piece of plastic. All the microphones in little tape recorders you've ever seen, 99% of them are electret microphones, where you have a little piece of film with a permanent charge. As the voice hits it, the film vibrates, and then there's a piece of metal next to it, and you measure the voltage between the two, feed it into the device, and that's where the voice signal comes from. So you can make an electret and rub various points, and it'll just feel really good. And you rub it one time or 50 times, and all of a sudden it'll quit feeling good, and you move on to the next point. If you do that on your fingers and on your feet, you'll feel really, really good. It'll normally alleviate almost any problem you have. And that's what an acupuncturist does. They can find where those places are that you need to have a treatment and do it that way. Another way to do it is to use an acupuncture needle and stick it into the point to charge it or discharge it. And there's a way to put it in to do either. So one of the products that we came up with is two little pieces of metal that you can have little indentations on them, and you can rub your points. And those pieces of metal had a number of holes in them, and people asked us what the holes were for, if it was critical to the use of the unit. I said, no, that's where you tie a shoelace. And if you loan it to somebody, you keep one hand with a shoelace around, because they won't give it back to you. It feels so good. And so we have tooling to make those, and I probably need to make another batch of them. But anyway, we found that these are there. Now it turns out that these points, like this is the lymphatic system here, and this is the lung system here. And if you go clear to the end of where, and there are points up the body, if you go clear to the end of where that meridian is, they all end at a tooth root. The teeth are piezoelectric. When you squeeze a piezoelectric material, it generates a voltage.
It's a charge.
Or if you take a piece of piezoelectric material and apply a voltage, it expands or contracts. The teeth are piezoelectric. So that's why you should take very good care of your teeth. And don't get a root canal unless you absolutely have to have it. And not that you'll die, but your health will go down. And so there's some things that we have. These little devices will make up for that and will charge you up. And so especially people who are missing a lot of teeth get a real success from that. And they have very, very pronounced little nodules, and their nodules usually are hard like a rock. And if they keep massaging them from time to time until it quits feeling, it feels as good as a scratch on a good itch. And when it quits feeling good, move to the next one. And after a period of time, you'll feel the granularity, and after a period of time, it'll just get softer, and there won't be any little nodule under the skin.
My mother had a large nodule right here, and it finally went away, but she worked on it for a couple of years. It was on the middle finger.
I have one here, as a matter of fact, and it comes and goes.
So you're saying that the tissues around the organs have an ionic transfer system, which is
to the organ, not that they're around the organ, but they go all the way up the body. If you start stripping out neural tissue, in fact, it's a kind of an interesting thing. Most people don't know, but lions and tigers never eat muscle tissue. It's highly toxic. They strip out the blood veins, the vessels, the neural tissue. They eat intestines, and they eat, the heart and the internal organs. They don't eat muscle tissue.
Really?
Yep. If they feed them muscle tissue, and they only give them muscle tissue, they'll eat it, but they get very ill. It's very highly toxic. But people eat all the muscle tissue and throw the good parts away.
Does that mean that we shouldn't eat a good raw steak if you're a meat eater?
Unfortunately. It's very obvious that I eat anything that's slower than I am. But that does mean that. As good as it tastes, it's not good for you.
I'm just trying to understand.
That's also why the kosher meats have a very specific way of sneaking up on the animal and not alarming them, and very mercifully putting them out of their demise, is because they don't want that animal to get excited and release a lot of toxin into the muscle tissue.
This is not,
whether they know it or not.
this is not the typical nervous system you're talking about with sodium.
No, there's no nervous system there. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. It's a completely different system. There was a Korean fellow, Kim Bon-jung, who postulated that he said that I found the neural system, and here are pictures of the little tubules that carry a yellow fluid, etc., etc. And that's all been reported, and you can find that all over the internet, and you can find it all over medical literature. But what it doesn't report is that 4 years later he committed suicide and said he was sorry for perpetrating such a hoax. There isn't that system. People looked for it and couldn't find it, and finally he just had to admit that he made it all up. And so that isn't the system. We found how it worked because we injected the radioactive potassium, and then we looked at it and then watched it go through the body. And it goes exceedingly fast. If you took blood from the tip of this finger and traced it back to the heart, it doesn't move very fast. It moves very, very slowly. It doesn't race through your veins. It jerks too. But if you inject the radioactive potassium here, we had to get a higher speed CAT scan machine to even see it. It really races. And it's the frequency of this. It's like milking a cow or a goat. It's a peristaltic action, and it really races through there. It's a very high frequency.
Now you're saying this is all happening with some interface with the consciousness field or the information field?
Informational field.
Okay. And
Yeah,
could you explain that? What's the energetic component?
That's a couple-hour lecture.
Well, could I get the elevator version?
There's not really an elevator version. It depends where it is, what the problem is, which meridian it is.
Okay, if an organ is dysfunctional, why would it matter what's going on in your hand?
It doesn't. It
Then-
makes what's going on in your hand. It creates what's going on in your hand.
Okay. So because they're the extremities, somehow...
Because we're built that way.
You're saying you can either heal it on the hand or you can heal it directly on the organ, right?
No,
No?
I wasn't saying that at all. What I'm saying is that problems in the organ manifest themselves both physically and informationally at the appropriate points on the body. Now, if you think about it, when you build a car, any car that you've had in the last 10 or 12 years has an electrical connector under the seat, and you plug a computer in there and it'll say the oxygen sensor is bad, the brakes are getting weak. It'll say a number of things. So let's assume that somehow, whether divinely or by genetics, we were designed. Why not design a system where you could test the thing? I mean, we don't come with an operator's manual, but maybe we come with a system that is very easy for us to find out what the problem is and then alter things. Now, one thing we found out is that every substance has an informational field around it. We found out that a way to take that substance, place it on a device, and from the device find a numerical signature for that information field. Then we found a way, therefore, to store it in a computer. Now we can take the computer and run that information back out and generate an informational field. We can make that field large so it surrounds the body, and we can then measure in real time at these points, most of which are acupuncture points and some aren't. There's some acupuncture points that we find don't do anything, even though they're classical points. Now, 6,000 years ago or 3,300 years ago, they didn't have any kind of measurement instruments. So we now have a biofeedback system that will actually do that.
A lot of our audience is going to think of the Rife machine when you say these numerical signatures.
That's very unfortunate.
Okay.
Because there's no correlation whatsoever. Has nothing to do with the Rife machine.
Okay. You worked for, didn't you work for Royal Rife?
I worked for Rife for a period of time, yes. And I know how his instruments worked. And it has no bearing on this whatsoever. This is a very gross mechanical type of thing.
Okay.
And it doesn't work at all like anybody thinks. So that's another story. But anyway, threw me off a little bit here in my thinking about this.
You can play a signature for specific compound.
Yeah, we can make a signature for the compound, and what happens is the body will react to that informational field as if you had given the person that substance. And so you can go to an acupuncture point and get information from it that you can graph and chart on a machine, and it will tell you whether that organ is in a type of inflammatory process or in a degenerative process, and how much, how long it's been there, whether it's winning the battle or losing the battle. And then you can put the person in an informational field from a substance that you think may solve that problem, and ask the body, and the body will react exactly as if you'd given that substance, so you can select a type of treatment.
When somebody is given a placebo, are they affecting their own informational field?
Absolutely. You talk to placebos work 50% of the time. And it isn't because placebos have a physical effect. They have a mental effect in some instances, and they have an informational effect in some instances.
So you should be able to affect your own informational field.
So yes, people ask me when I built these very complex computerized machines that do the diagnosis and selection of treatment, they ask me, what's your goal for this machine? And I said, my goal is when the doctor throws the thing in the dipsy dumpster and just does it. And that can be done. However, the machine takes away his emotional state and his emotional interference with it, and the patient's emotional state and the patient's emotional characteristics with it. But one of the machines that I want to come out with in the future is one that's a biofeedback device that allows the patient to put himself in an informational or mental state that affects the problem with the body. And that can be done. It's easily be done. And other than gross poisoning or gross overconsumption of something, such, for example, it's very beneficial to have vitamin A. We don't get enough vitamin A in our bodies, but you take too much vitamin A and you'll find yourself gaining water and getting ascites, and some people die from it. And many people almost die from it. So too much of a good thing is too much, no matter how good the thing is.
A lot of people are going to want to know, is anybody using this technology? Is there any doctors out there using it?
There are, right now in the United States that I know of, 18,000 clinics.
18,000?
18,000 clinics using this technology. I taught 7 companies how to make it. About 5 other companies came in and stole the information from them, which if they'd come and asked me, I'd have handed it to them.
Huh.
Because I knew it was going to need 20 or 25 years out there before it got itself established. And so what I did was I let other people do it, and I ran around in front of them like the man that runs in front of a curling iron and sweeping a pathway for it. I went around in front of them sweeping a pathway in front of the FDA, and we got a very, very good publicity man whose mother had been given, I don't know, 8 or 10 weeks to live, and we kept her alive for another 17 years.
Oh my gosh.
And he felt very happy about that, and so he jumped on our bandwagon. And out of that, it finally ended up, and about 10 or 12 years later, there's actually an alternative medical branch of the FDA, And that branch handles things like we have, and in the meantime I spent a lot of money and a lot of time and effort and got this device actually approved by the FDA.
So that was my next question. There must be publications, there must be documentation out there.
Well, the only documentation I know is when you put my name into a computer, it'll come up and tell what a fraud this device is and how it's a quack device. But if you find out who put that in there, you'll find out that he says the same thing about a lot of other things that work. And then if you go and watch the man, you'll find that the checks that he cashes at the bank are from large pharmaceutical companies and from the government at times.
Right.
So what name are they going to put into the computer for that device?
I'm not going to say that. I'm not interested in thousands of people associating that and being able to show their friends that I'm a fraud. Anybody who wants to know if it's a fraud, come to me. I'll give you the closest doctor. You can go there and ask the doctor whether his 3, 5, 7, 10,000 patients that went there and 2 days later walked out without their problem think that it's a fraud. Now, I know it's not 100% placebo, because placebos only work 50% of the time. And even though the medical people, the AMA says, their doctors only get 5% of their clinical diagnoses correct, if they only get, 5% or 6% now this year of their clinical diagnoses correct, what do you think they get correct of the treatment? You know why they say practicing medicine. Or on the other hand, watch the TV show House, and each incidence is they try 5 or 6 or 7 treatments, almost killing the patient each time, and then find out what the solution is. He's supposed to be the best diagnostician in the world, on television. But it's very true to life. Comes out of Canada. They're a lot more frank there. And you get the picture of practicing medicine. They don't have an idea. They don't have a way to have an idea. And so I'm now ready, after 28 years of having this device out there, and about somewhere between, probably 1.2 to 4 million or maybe more patient visits behind it, all computerized. In the medical terminology, it's anecdotal, because the patient can't tell you if they're well or they don't have the symptom any longer. That's illegal. But I'm now ready to go up against any one of them, because I can prove that my diagnoses with this type of machine are absolutely correct, because when they go look with conventional diagnostic tools and equipment, I'll see the problem as much as 20 years before it manifests itself in the body, where common medical things can test it. How can I prove that? Well, I'll wait 20 years and prove it. That's what we've done. That's why I have 27 years of testing done on it. That's why I have people that came and thought it was a fraud and didn't accept the medication, but I watched them over a period of time and saw them eventually die of what I told them they would die from. So I now have enough evidence. I'm ready to go and do that, except I'm not going to do that because I don't have any desire to be assassinated. But I have people that have more testicles than I have that are willing to do it. Pardon my 10 years in the Marine Corps.
You said there's a lot of clones of this technology out there. People have stolen it from you, and
they didn't steal it from me. They stole it from other people. I gave it away, so they couldn't steal it from me. If they'd come to me, I'd have given it to them.
Is it variable in terms of how well they work?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The first thing I did was, in my instrument, when you touch the body, in the beginning, the person doesn't know where the points are. So I put a point locator, and the point locator made a tone, which almost everybody likened it to the sound of a cow that was dying. Okay? So when I gave the people how to build this thing, they build it, and everybody says, oh, that sounds like a cow dying, so they changed the tone. They eliminated 80% of the effectiveness of the machine. Because the tone carried a lot of information that if the doctor had only persisted with it for a month, he could then hear that tone, and he could cut diagnosis time down from 35 to 40 minutes to 2.5 to 3 minutes.
Wow.
It just became natural. Oh, I know what that means. I know what that tone means. Let me try this. Let me try that. And he can dial up on the machine now some 850,000 different substances that are in this world. All the medications of every medical system known, all the herbals of every herbal system known, all the magic healing potions of every magic healing potion system known, all the chemicals that are out there that are man-made, all the chemicals that you find in nature, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the pharmaceuticals in the homeopathic pharmacopoeia and in the allopathic pharmacopoeia. Everything's there. So you can go to, the machine will help you sort those out and find out exactly what will alleviate the problem. And many times you'll find something that will alleviate a problem in the for example, the small intestine, but find that it'll aggravate the neural system. So you say, oh, well, there must be another medication that'll work and not counteract something here. So you can go back and find that particular medication. Now you know what to give. Now you can ask it, okay, if I'm going to give this, how much should I give? It'll tell you an exact amount. And like everything in nature, there's a bell curve produced, a curve that looks like a bell. And you want that medication that's right at the peak of the bell curve. You want just that amount that'll produce that reaction. And bang, you give it. And many times when we give the medications to a patient, they'll bounce up and down like they were at Disneyland on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And all of a sudden they go, oh, I've had that pain for 20 years and now it's gone. Did we heal them? No. Did we cure them? No. Why do I say no? Because it's against the law. Did they believe they were healed? Yes. Did they believe they were cured? Yes. What makes the difference?
One thing that I think is really important is if this video is out there online, there's going to be a lot of people that want to claim that they have this technology to profit from it.
Oh, absolutely.
And it may not be the one that you're actually talking about.
Absolutely.
How do we prevent against that? Is there a search term we can give people on Google or doctors that actually are using the right one? Or
well, the problem is that the first about 6,000 doctors I trained, and they had machines that mooed like a cow, and it was really good, and after that it went downhill. So again, I'm building a laboratory and a factory where I will produce these. And instead of having to do like you have to do today, to pay between $12,000 and $50,000 for one of the machines, I've got one that's built in fountain pen, and we'll probably sell it for around $99.
Wow!
But there are similar heating modalities in existence.
Oh,
which is
there are some that work beautifully.
Radionics.
But there are radionics machines that.
I'm not saying it's the same. I'm just saying that it's something that works.
Yeah, works very well. Oh, works very well, and it works with the. Yes, exactly right. It works through the informational field.
Have you heard of the Skanar, the Russian Skanar?
I've definitely heard of the Skanar, having spent about 8 months with the people doing it, and,
really?
And working together with them. There's another machine for pain. It's called the Acuscope, which was brought to this country by Tony Nabrensky, who was the KGB man in this country looking for medical technology to send home to Russia.
There's a guy named Dr. Hartmut Mueller who built this LED thing that you put on your skin. Is that another one that you think works?
No.
It doesn't work?
No, I didn't say that.
Oh.
I said there are things that work a lot better. That's what I meant to say.
Okay. But people can also, as you said, massage these points on their hand.
The best medical machine they ever invented were these two little things we call acucombs that you just rub your points with and get well.
Is there a way people could build those on their own?
They probably could as soon as they saw one, but it's easier and cheaper to buy one for me because I've paid thousands of dollars for the tooling, and they stamp them out like shells coming out of a machine gun, and we put them in a tumbler and tumble them, and they actually have a electric material that we invented to actually do the charging. And it's interesting in that you can take one of the units and do it. And by the way, you can find out how you'll react to any food. One of the best things is that anything that goes into the body, you say, how do my organs react to that? There's a reason that the highest paid doctor is the anesthesiologist. It's because he has to pay the most insurance. And I think, I may be wrong, you'd have to check what it is these days, but when I was working on it, 2 out of every 100 people were killed by the anesthetic. This thing will tell you exactly, because this finger and the distal side of the middle finger tells you about food absorption here and allergy here. And it will tell you whether you have an allergic dispensation toward that medicine. It'll tell you that anesthetic. It'll tell you how your body will react to it.
How does it tell you?
By making an indication.
What?
There's an indication on a meter and on a chart. And when you learn how to read the meter and learn how to read the chart, which can be taught in approximately 1 minute, you can tell whether you're going to have an allergic reaction or not. Another thing we found was out of an major university's animal husbandry department, we found that there are 33 substances that all humans and all animals are allergic to. Most of them are phenolic compounds, have a 6-sided benzene ring in the molecule, and a couple are hormones and a couple are proteins. And we found out that we can measure here, and we can find out exactly, if you have allergies, exactly what you're allergic to, and then we can take that material and prepare it homeopathically and give you a couple drops under the tongue, and that allergy will disappear entirely. And then after a period of time, it may come back, and we'll find that you need a homeopathic remedy of a different, what they call potency or strength. And then you take that, and sometimes it takes you 3 or 4 days to chase this thing around and find out exactly what you need, but eventually you'll get to an end point and you won't have that allergy. And as far as I know, when we've tested people now for 28 years, nobody's ever had an allergy come back.
Wow.
And we're dealing strictly with an informational system here that modern science refuses to do, but it doesn't seem to make much difference to those people who had allergies and don't, that modern science doesn't like it. It doesn't fit their paradigm, which is wrong.
I just want to say on camera here that what we are very clear about, having spent quite some time talking with you, that you're not trying to get rich through any of this. You want to make this technology available.
I have no need to make any money. Yeah. The only reason I want to build the things is so they're built right and they moo like a cow. Dying cow.
Yeah.
Because that lets the doctor do the treatment for much less, or the diagnoses for much less money. And remember, the doctor only uses us to help him in making his diagnoses. Diagnoses can't be made by a machine, only made by a doctor.
Yeah.
And that's why in the beginning we only sold them to card-carrying AMA, card-carrying MDs. Then we sold a few to chiropractors. We sold a few of them to osteopaths, a few of them to naturopaths. And then the first person to have one that was a veterinarian was the veterinary commissioner for the state of Nevada. And she started using them. And then we have now, I quit keeping track when I started trying to keep in front of these people and keep them out of trouble for using them. And we've not had any trouble in using them because we kept them out of trouble. And anyway, at the time, this was maybe 18 years ago, there were about 350 veterinarians using them. And they were working perfectly. They could find out what problems animals had and how to solve the problem.
Okay. Folks, we're coming to the end of our 3rd hour, and there may be a number of other topics which we want to touch on before, well, while we have the opportunity. In fact, I know there are a number of other topics. I've had my share of the cherry. David, is there more things you'd like to pick up on? I know that Kerry's got some questions too.
Yeah, I'm just sensitive to all the emails that are going to be coming in. People are going to want to know how to buy these little plates. So if you say you can machine them, once you're ready to do that, can you give us information?
If I had orders, I could probably ship within 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I can't tell you what they cost. I know that one of the plates, out of necessity, needs to be copper. And I know that one of the plates, the factory that used to make my electret material, has gone out of business. So either I'll have to make it or find a factory that does it. But we have tooling that fits in a machine called a Yamada punch press that punches it out faster than you can even see, and then it just has to be tumbled in the right combination of things to make it smooth and easy to handle so it doesn't have sharp edges on it.
But it's not that expensive is the bottom line.
It's not really that expensive. I would the copper in it now costs about $7 or $8 for the copper plate, and probably much the same for the electric plate. And then we have to stamp it and process it. It comes in normally in a little carrying case with a separation between the two,
Okay.
and a little set of cards that you can fold out that shows all the points on the hand, all the points on the feet. So they're pressure points, whether things that you deal with indigestion and headaches and that kind of thing.
Well, you have your first order right now.
Yeah. I've taken them to, oh, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred health fairs and Psychotronic Association meetings and Global Science Congress and Tesla Society meetings and dowsing meetings and so forth, and I've never taken them. I started with taking 20, and then I take 50, and then I take 100, and I've never found a time that it didn't sell out before noon.
Right.
On the first day. And and once I sell 3 or 4, then people can't put it down. So they're standing there doing it. People go, where'd you get that? What does that do? And the guy, here, let me try it. No, I don't have a shoelace. So then I start giving a shoelace with them so they get them back. So anyway, people like the way it makes them feel. It likes the way they make their hands feel. And they determine by themselves, without any help from the government, that they actually do something for them that they like, and so they buy them.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I think it's really important to note that the healing is within. We all have this power to heal ourselves.
Well, like I said, in any medical device that I've ever done, and I've also, by having the machine as a biofeedback tool, I found a number of substances that do miraculous things for the body. And
such as?
Out of all those substances and all the machines, the best thing I ever did was the plates, and they're not expensive. And what I tell people is, if you think about this right, you can just throw the plates away. Which brings up another device that I'll be putting out that looks like a cigarette pack. Well, that's a bad thing to use. Like a pack of playing cards. Maybe that's even bad to use. But it's a little device that has a headband that you have a little electrode you soak with salt water in the front and the rear. And it measures...
Salt water?
Salt water. Just regular salt water, table salt. And you put that on and it makes a tone. And we give a little cassette tape that makes a tone. And you can learn to, with your brain, you can learn to match. It's like if I hum or whistle Yankee Doodle 10 times, you can hum Yankee Doodle. And if I do Mary Had a Little Lamb, you can do Mary Had a Little Lamb. This makes a sound, and you learn to generate that sound by holding your tongue right. By seeing a watchmaker work.
The position of your tongue changes the tone?
No, that's what I didn't want to say.
Oh.
If you watch someone that's doing precision work, like an engraver or a watchmaker, they do it this way.
Okay.
Yes, they have to hold their tongue in a certain way, and it lets them do things, but you don't necessarily have to hold your tongue right. You learn how to hold your mind right. And
so this gives off an even pitch, but the pitch is varying?
No, it's not an even pitch. It's a varying pitch. It sounds like whistling a tune.
Okay.
And so you learn to make that tune by thinking right, and you'll eventually, you put it on, and if you do different things mentally, you'll get different tones. So you learn to hold those tones so you get the tone that was on the little tape. And when you get to that point, you can then alter these things without the plates. You can just do it mentally.
This is going to make me sound stupid, but people in the audience are going to compare that to the Monroe tapes with the binaural synchronization in the ears. Is there any relationship with those?
None whatsoever.
I didn't think so. Is this like an EKG, like it's a brainwave?
No.
Okay. What's making the tone?
A electrical field that's generated by the body.
So why these 2 points then?
Because those are the ones that work.
Okay. So is it only used for healing, or are there other...
You can do my favorite thing to do with it is find somebody that's into to brainwave analysis and brainwave work, and go have them implement me and then play Yankee Doodle for them with my brain. they immediately say, oops, the machine is broken, we've got to fix it, because nobody can learn to do that. Sorry, I could teach anybody to play Yankee Doodle with their brain in 2 weeks.
But I mean, are there...
And then once you learn to do Yankee Doodle, you can do Mary Had a Little Lamb in about 10 minutes.
Let's say you have a guy that can move things with his mind. He has telekinesis, and he
Yep.
makes a song on this
He
thing.
makes a song, and you buy the song from him, like buying an MP3 thing, and you make that song, chances are very good you're going to run that little ball bearing around through the maze with your head.
Really?
Yep.
That's very interesting.
And I can tell you that government agencies have bought those by the thousands.
So
How would you get an electrode on the back of your head? Isn't that going to go through your hair?
Well, surplus-wise, I bought about 10,000 little fold-out razors that are used to scrape hair off the body when the surgeon needs to sew it up. You just put a little shaving cream on it and scrape a little piece off.
And there's a headband you wear?
There's a headband you wear, and there's 2 little electrodes made out of a special metal, and they have a little cotton sock over them. And you soak this, you take water and you put it in a little bowl and you stir water and salt together until no more salt will dissolve, and you dip those in there and squeeze them out a little bit and put them, and use a little washcloth with some soap on it and wipe the grease off the area here and the grease off the area back here that you've balded, and put it on, and it works just fine.
Wow. How precise do you have to be in placement? Does it have to be right smack on?
No, within a couple inches. No, it doesn't go on the third eye. That's a lot of your people will ask that. It goes in a different spot.
Okay.
But it's very easy to tell where it goes because you put it on and it isn't making we'll call it brainwave noise. That's not what it is. But then anything that isn't hooked directly to the brain isn't brainwave noise anyway.
I have a 60-second question before this tape goes out. Why would the agencies be interested in stuff like this?
Oh, I don't know that I can say that.
Okay, we'll leave it to our imagination.
Leave it to your imagination.
Okay.
I can tell you that there were a lot of them bought at SRI, and a lot of them were bought by...
To teach remote influencing.
I didn't say that. I didn't even hint that.
I said
And
that.
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Oh.
Not unless you'd like a visit. You will have a visit if you mention it.
Okay.
And you won't like it. Been involved with trying to build flying saucers. You usually found that flying saucers, if you look at most of the movies, there's always seems to be a robot involved with it.